The first time my family sold me, I found out from the news. It happened in a glass conference room on the 43rd floor, while I was explaining to a trembling bakery owner why selling 60% of her company was the only way to keep her employees paid. Rain dragged silver lines down the windows. The city looked blurred and distant, like it had already decided not to be part of whatever was happening in my life. "Mr. Hale," the woman whispered, fingers tight around her coffee cup. "Will they keep my people?" "Yes," I said automatically. "That's the condition. No layoffs. Your brand stays yours." I had said that sentence so many times it lived in my mouth. Families were my specialty. Quiet collapses. Gentle rescues. I was the one they sent in to make it hurt less. My assistant knocked once and slipped inside, tablet in her hands, color gone from her face. "Mark, I'm sorry but..." She didn't finish. She just turned the screen toward me. "Hale Group sells controlling stake to Valdez Corporation. Hostile takeover ends century-old family control." For half a second my brain refused to read the words. They looked like the wrong language. Like something meant for someone else. Then I saw the photo. My mother. Elegant. Calm. Standing beside a man I had only seen in headlines. NIKO Valdez. And under the headline, in smaller, cleaner text, "The agreement was personally guaranteed by merger lawyer Mark Hale." The room tilted. "What?" I breathed. My phone started vibrating across the table. Then again. Emails. Messages. Missed calls stacking on top of each other like a collapse in slow motion. Employees I'd known since childhood. "Is this true? Did you sell us? What's going to happen to my department?" "Mark, please answer." I excused myself without remembering standing up. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and new carpet. I walked it like someone else's body. Thumb already pressing my mother's name.
If this story caught you, subscribe. More are waiting.
Straight to voicemail. Again. Straight to voicemail. "Mom?" I said when the tone cut in. "Call me. Now." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the dark glass. Same suit. Same tie. Same face that had signed 1,000 contracts meant to protect people. And now my name was on the knife. It felt exactly like that. My name. Not my signature. My name. Used like a seal. Like wax pressed into something I had never agreed to. A notification banner slid across my screen. Live, Valdez Corporation CEO addresses Hale acquisition. I shouldn't have tapped it. NIKO Valdez filled the screen, black suit, open collar, the city burning white behind him. He didn't smile. He didn't scowl. He spoke like someone who never needed to raise his voice. "Our priority is operational continuity and staff protection," he said. "We did not buy a brand, we bought responsibility." Something in my chest reacted before I could stop it. A strange pressure. Heat, low and sudden. Like the air itself had leaned closer. I hated it instantly. I hated that my body registered him at all. That some ancient chemical part of me paid attention to a man I was supposed to despise. I closed the video with a sharp movement, like slamming a door. Another message came in. Not from a reporter. Not from an employee. Unknown number. "You're expected tomorrow. 8 a.m. No signature. I didn't need one. I stood there in the quiet hallway, rain ticking against the glass, my phone buzzing in my hand, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't tell who exactly had just taken control of my future. All I knew was that it hadn't been me. Valdez Corporation didn't look like a place where old families hung their portraits. No oil paintings, no engraved mission statements. No framed black and white photos of men shaking hands over factories they no longer owned. NIKO Valdez's building smelled like living things. Real plants. Real wood. Dark panels that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city feel close enough to touch, not something to dominate. The receptionist didn't ask my name. She already knew it. "Mr. Hale," she said, standing. "They're expecting you." Of course they were. The elevator rose in complete silence. No music, no mirrors, just the faint hum of motion and my own reflection in brushed steel, jaw set too tight. The doors opened onto a wide open office space, glass walls, low voices, movement that felt purposeful instead of frantic. A woman in a crimson blazer intercepted me halfway across the floor. "Mark Hale," she said briskly. "Lena Ortiz, PR. Welcome to the apocalypse." "That bad?" I asked. She gave a humorless smile. "Worse. Come on. He hates being kept waiting. So the monster was punctual. Another man joined us, tall, gray-templed, expression carved from legal stone. Thomas Reed, he said. Corporate counsel. Do you blink? I asked, or is that a lifestyle choice? Lena snorted. Thomas did not. We stopped in front of a glass door. Inside waited a room of dark wood and green leaves, and a single man standing near the windows, hands in his pockets, city light striping his shoulders. NIKO VALDEZ did not turn when we entered. He was taller than he'd looked on screen. Broader. Stillness gathered around him the way noise did around other people. Mr. Valdez, Lena said. Mark Hale. He turned then. Slowly. Precisely. Like he knew exactly what effect it would have. His eyes were dark. Not cold. Focused. The kind that made you suddenly aware of how much space your body took up. Mark, he said. Just my name. Like it was neutral ground. Pressure slid down my spine before I could stop it. Heat. Awareness. My beta instincts, usually quiet as background code, lifting their heads like something had changed in the room's temperature. I hated my nervous system. Mr. Valdez, I replied. Congratulations on your acquisition. A corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. More like an acknowledgement of the attempt. Sit, he said. Not a command. An assumption. I did. He took the chair across from me, crossing his arms loosely. No display. No posturing. The calm of someone who didn't need to prove he was dangerous. We'll be working together, he said. At least for now. I'm not employed by your company. You are, he corrected gently. If you want Hale Group's transition to be anything but violent. There it was. The blade, finally visible. My role was as an external consultant, I said. That contract is void. NIKO studied me for a long moment. Your mother didn't think so. Something sharp went through my chest. She offered you, he continued, tone even, as proof this would go quietly. Continuity. A familiar face. The family lawyer smoothing the edges. Lena shifted beside the wall. Thomas looked at the table. I felt it then. Not humiliation exactly. Something colder. They don't own me, I said. No. NIKO agreed. But they sold me the story that you still belong to them. Silence spread. Then he reached across the table and slid a thin folder toward me. Internal counsel position. Temporary, full access. You help stabilize what they broke. Or you walk. And I bring in auditors who don't care how many people get crushed in the process. I didn't touch the folder. You're threatening me. I'm offering you control, he said, over how much damage happens next. His gaze didn't leave my face. It wasn't predatory in the way the articles described. It was attentive. Like he was measuring something he couldn't see on paper. My pulse refused to behave. Why me? I asked. Because, NIKO said, you're the only honest part of this deal. I let out a short, disbelieving breath. You bought my family's company. Yes. You're dismantling everything they built. No, he said quietly. I'm keeping what they were hiding behind. I should have stood. Should have walked out. Instead, I stared at the folder. At my name on the tab. And understood, with a sinking clarity, that this man hadn't bought a company. He'd walked into a collapse. And my family had handed him me as a peace offering. The Hale Group building had always smelled like lemon polish and old paper. As a child I'd thought it was the smell of importance. Now it smelled like something trying too hard not to rot. The lobby was exactly the same. Marble floors, soft classical music, a discreet water feature murmuring near the elevators. No chaos. No journalists. No hint that our century-old family empire had quietly sold its spine overnight. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, and I walked straight into our museum. That was what my mother liked to call it. Heritage space. Oil portraits lined the corridor, men with stiff collars and colder eyes, women posed beside factories and ledgers, hands resting on shoulders that had never carried anything heavy. Generations of founders and inheritors, all framed in gold, all immortalized as saviors. The conference room waited at the end of the hall. Long table. High-backed chairs. Flags in the corner. The old Hale crest, carved into dark wood above the screen. They were already seated. Board members. Executives. My mother at the head, composed as always, pale hair swept into a soft knot, pearl earrings catching the light. She smiled when she saw me, and the room subtly rearranged itself around that expression. Mark, she said warmly. I was hoping you'd come before the press conference. Hoping. My jaw locked before I could stop it. You used my name, I said. No greeting. No preamble. You put it in a legal release for a deal I didn't know existed. She gestured to the chair beside her. Sit. You're exhausted. I stayed standing. A flicker passed through her eyes. Not anger. Calculation. Of course we used your name. She continued gently. You're our chief mergers counsel. You've been leading negotiations with Valdez's competitors for months. From the outside this looks like a natural evolution. So you forged consent. We contextualized reality. I felt it then. A pressure behind my sternum, like someone had pressed their palm into my chest and refused to move. Owen sat 2 seats down, hands folded. He didn't look at me. You knew, I said. He swallowed. Just once. Yes. The word hurt more than I expected. One of the board members cleared his throat. Mark, you need to understand the situation. The screen behind them lit up. Graphs. Red lines. Downward curves. My mother nodded to the display. We are facing a multi-front legal exposure, 2 labor lawsuits, a pending environmental audit, debt leverage at a critical level. Say it, I said quietly. Her gaze met mine, steady and calm. We were 6 to 9 months from losing control anyway. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the projector. And Valdez? I asked. You just chose him? We chose survival. A word I'd built my career around. A word I'd repeated to crying founders and shaking families like it was holy. Survival. At what cost? I asked. My mother stood, smoothing her jacket, walking toward me the way she used to when I was young and anxious and convinced she always knew best. You're thinking emotionally, she said. That's understandable. But this was strategic. Valdez has the capital, the infrastructure, the crisis teams we need. And you. She reached out, fingertips brushing my sleeve. You are exceptionally good at transitions. I pulled my arm back. You mean I make people accept things? I mean, you make them hurt less. No, I said. I make them quieter. Her expression softened. It always did when she was about to say something unforgivable in a pleasant voice. You were raised for this, she said. You've always understood how to stabilize conflict, how to carry pressure. That's your role, Mark. My role, I repeated. Yes. The negotiator, the bridge, the one who keeps the family standing while others panic. The word family echoed in the room full of people who had just sold its future without telling me. You didn't even ask, I said. We didn't need to, she replied. You've never said no before. Something in me cracked, not loudly, not cleanly. Just enough to let cold air in. I looked around the table, at the men and women who had watched me build a career out of absorbing impact. At the portraits on the walls, smiling in their frames like saints of respectable damage. Families were my specialty. And none of them had ever been innocent. I don't belong to this deal, I said. My mother tilted her head, studying me like a document she already knew how to amend. Mark, she said gently, you belong to this company, you always have. The pain in my chest sharpened. And for the first time, I understood something with a terrifying clarity. I had never been saving families. I had been maintaining them. By the next morning, Hale Group wasn't a company, it was a trending topic. My inbox looked like it had been mugged. Valdez vulture. Save Hale workers. Mark Hale sellout. Somebody had already pulled an old photo of me shaking hands with my mother at a charity gala and slapped the headline "The Family Fixer" over my face, like a sticker you put on a jar you plan to keep. I walked into Valdez Corporation's PR floor and got hit with the smell of printer toner and adrenaline. Phones rang. Screens glowed. People moved with the kind of urgency that didn't come from panic. This was trained chaos. Controlled burns. Lena Ortiz spotted me immediately. She crossed the room in heels sharp enough to cut glass, holding a tablet like it was evidence in court. Good news, she said without slowing. You're not the villain anymore. I blinked. That's good news? You're the betrayed son. America loves a betrayed son. Don't worry, we'll get you a camera angle that makes you look like you've suffered in a tasteful way. I have suffered? Great. Suffering sells. Follow me. She dragged me past a wall of monitors. Every screen had a different version of the same story. NIKO Valdez, corporate predator, devours century-old family business. Employees brace for layoffs. Anonymous sources claim Hale executives were forced. Leaked documents suggest hostile terms. My stomach tightened. Anonymous sources was boardroom code for my mother. A door opened ahead of us, and Thomas Reed stepped out, his expression unchanged from yesterday. Legal stone, polished daily. Press conference moved up, he said. 10 minutes. 10 minutes? I repeated. To do what? Learn to breathe in public? Lena shot him a look. He'll do fine, he's a Hale. They come out of the womb knowing how to smile while stabbing someone. Excuse me, I said. Not you, she added, without missing a beat. You're the one who smiles while getting stabbed. I didn't have time to decide whether to be offended. The studio was 2 floors down, a glass and light box built for modern warfare. Cables snaked across the floor. Cameras sat like black eyes on tripods. Makeup artists hovered with powder and warning smiles. Heat built under my collar. I had done interviews before, clean ones. Controlled ones. The kind where you reassure shareholders with words like stability and continuity, while your soul floats somewhere above the lights, watching. Today felt different. Today was personal. A mic was clipped to my lapel. Another was offered to Niko, who had just arrived and looked like the storm outside had asked him for tips. He wore charcoal, not black. Open collar, no tie. His calm filled the room the way smoke filled space, soft and inevitable. Morning, Mark, he said, like we were co-workers in any normal universe. You're enjoying this, I muttered. I'm not, he replied, and if anyone else had said it, I would have believed them less. But Niko spoke with the same tone whether he was buying a company or ordering coffee. Lena stepped between us. Okay. Here's the plan. We do 2 statements. Short, clean, no defensiveness. Niko, you emphasize employee protection. Mark, you emphasize transparency and operational continuity. My mouth twisted. Transparency. From the family that used my name as a weapon. Lena didn't flinch. Exactly. America loves a man who finally grows a spine. Niko's gaze flicked to me. Not mockery. Something sharper. Assessment. You can walk, he said quietly. So only I could hear. I turned my head. What? If you don't want to be here, Niko continued, voice low, you can walk, I won't stop you. For a second my body did that stupid thing again. The heat, the pressure, the traitorous awareness of him close enough that I could smell clean soap and something deeper, something like winter air before it snaps. I hated it. And I hated that the offer sounded real. Too late, I said. My face is already on the internet with the word sellout stamped on it. Niko's mouth moved in that almost smile again. Then let's make sure the internet is wrong. We stepped onto the marks taped on the studio floor. A producer counted down with fingers. 3, 2, 1. The lights hit like a physical thing. Sweat rose at the back of my neck. The air tasted metallic, like batteries. A reporter's voice came through the speakers. Mr. Valdez, are you planning layoffs? Niko didn't blink. No. The reporter pressed. No layoffs at all. Not even executive cuts. Niko's gaze didn't waver. We're freezing non-essential hiring and restructuring leadership compensation. We're maintaining staff positions. People are not excess. They're the company. My chest tightened again, but this time, it wasn't just anger. It was confusion. Another reporter, Mr. Hale, did you help orchestrate this? Did you sell out your own company? Cameras turned toward me like 1,000 judgmental eyes. I swallowed, jaw aching. I didn't know about the sale, I said. I found out the same way the employees did, through the press. The studio went quieter. And now? The reporter asked. Why are you standing beside him? I could feel Niko's attention like weight. Not pressure. Not dominance. Just presence. Because, I said, choosing each word like a legal clause, I'm not here to protect a family name. I'm here to protect the people who will be hurt if this turns into a circus. Lena exhaled softly off camera, like I'd just hit the mark she'd painted for me. The questions kept coming. The lights kept burning. The air kept thinning. And the strangest part was this. Every time the reporters tried to paint Niko as a monster, he didn't react like a monster. He reacted like a man trying to hold a collapsing building up with his bare hands. The gap between the headlines and the reality widened until it felt like a chasm I might fall into. And for the first time since my name appeared in that press release, I had a thought I didn't want. What if the villain everyone warned me about isn't the one who sold me? By hour 4 the air in the conference room had gone stale. Not metaphorically, literally. No windows. No natural light. Just a long mat table, a wall-sized screen, and the low, unrelenting breath of the ventilation system pushing recycled air across our skin like something tired and patient. We'd been down here since the press conference. Niko, me, Thomas, 2 senior analysts. I didn't know well enough to remember their names. Coffee had appeared, disappeared, been replaced. At some point my jacket had come off. At another, I'd stopped checking my phone. Numbers filled the screen. Debt ratios. Pending litigation exposure. Infrastructure decay. Insurance gaps. Departmental burn rates. The kind of data I was trained to read. The kind I'd spent a decade learning to translate into gentler words. Scroll back, I said, voice rough. The analyst complied. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes tracking a line item that made my throat tighten. These reserves, I said. They were reported as liquid. They weren't, Thomas replied calmly. They were pledged? Since when? 2.5 years ago. My jaw tensed. That would have triggered a mandatory disclosure. Niko didn't look at me. His attention was on the numbers. It did, he said. Buried, cross-indexed. Legal but optimistic. Optimistic, I echoed. The word tasted like rust. Another set of documents opened. Lawsuits I'd never seen. Settlements deferred. Environmental audits postponed through political donations thinly disguised as community programs. This exposure alone could have shut down 3 facilities, I said. It would have, Niko replied. In about 6 months. The ventilation whispered above us. I rubbed my face, heat pressing behind my eyes. Then, why didn't it? Because they borrowed against projected buyouts, one of the analysts said. Which never came. I looked up sharply. Buyouts from who? Niko finally turned his head. From me, he said. The words landed heavier than I expected. You've been circling us, I said. For 4 years. And you're saying, I continued slow, that my family has known for 4 years that we were bleeding out. Yes. My chest ached, not with shock, not anymore. With something like delayed impact. And they kept sending me to save other companies, I said. To make speeches about ethical mergers. To tell founders they could protect their people if they made the right deals. Niko watched me carefully now. They needed your reputation clean, he said. It was part of the asset. I laughed. It came out wrong. Too sharp. Too empty. I was the proof of concept, I said. Look. We fix broken systems. We're not one. Silence. The numbers kept glowing. I stood abruptly, pushing my chair back. The sound cracked through the room like a dropped plate. You could have gutted us, I said. You could have stripped the brand, sold the patents, liquidated the real estate. People would have called it efficient. Yes. So why didn't you? Niko didn't answer right away. He stood too, unbuttoning his cuffs with slow precision. The room felt smaller with him upright, closer to my height. Not imposing. Present. Come here, he said, and moved to the screen. Another file opened. Employee distribution. Facility maps. Medical coverage tables. Faces appeared. Group photos. Safety training snapshots. Factory floors. These, Niko said, gesturing, are not assets. My throat tightened. They're the cost, I said. No, he corrected. They're the point. I looked at him. Truly looked. You don't buy failing companies, I said. You buy disasters. I buy responsibility, he replied. Because if I don't, someone else will. And they won't bother pretending people matter. I shook my head. You expect me to believe you're some kind of corporate savior. No, he said. I expect you to believe I'm a realist with enough money to absorb the hit. I stared at the images. At the names. At the departments my mother had been prepared to sacrifice quietly, neatly, without scandal. I didn't come to bury Heir Group, Niko continued. I came because no one else would touch it without killing everyone inside. The room felt very quiet then. Even the ventilation seemed to pause. Something inside me gave way, not dramatically. Not like a movie revelation, like a shelf that had been carrying too much weight for too long. All the speeches. All the framed founders. All the dinners where my mother talked about legacy and stability and protection. It hadn't been salvation. It had been postponement. And the man everyone had painted as the monster hadn't arrived with teeth. He'd arrived with a tourniquet. I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted in a way sleep wouldn't touch. Across the table, Niko watched me with an expression I couldn't name. Not triumph. Something closer to recognition. And in the windowless room where the truth finally had nowhere to hide, my entire professional mythology collapsed into a pile of very expensive lies. The building felt different once the numbers had names. After the windowless room, after the graphs and quiet confessions, walking through Heir Group's floors was like stepping into a photograph that had finally been allowed to move. I didn't go back to Niko's office. I took the stairs down and let the sound of work replace the sound of ventilation. Phones rang. Printers hummed. Someone laughed near the copy machines. Someone swore softly at a jammed drawer. Life. The first department I stopped in was logistics. I'd been here 100 times, always as a passerby, always on my way somewhere more strategic. A man in a blue vest nearly walked into me, while carrying a box of folders. Sorry, oh. He froze. You're Mark Hale. Just Mark, I said. His grip tightened. Are we losing this floor? There it was. The real question. No, I said. And this time? It wasn't a line. Not today. Not like this. He studied my face like he was reading a medical chart. Then, cautiously, he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay. That's okay. He walked on. The word stayed with me. Okay. I moved through engineering next. Then procurement. Then design. Everywhere, the same tension lived just under the surface. Conversations softened when I passed. People watched me like I carried weather in my pockets. In the cafeteria, I finally met Grace. She was sitting alone at a round table, stirring a coffee she wasn't drinking. ID badge twisted so tightly around her fingers it looked like it hurt. Grace from HR. I recognized her from quarterly meetings. She usually sat in the back, took immaculate notes, and spoke only when spoken to. Is this seat taken? I asked. She startled. Oh, no, please. I sat. She hesitated. Then, are they going to make me fire everyone? The bluntness of it hit harder than any accusation. No, I said. And they're not making you... She let out a sound that wasn't quite a breath and wasn't quite a laugh. You say that like you're sure. I am. Because of him, she said. Not a question. Yes. She studied her cup. I've been getting emails since 6 this morning. Benefits revisions, facility safety audits, requests for updated insurance data. My chest tightened. From Valdez? She nodded. They're already rolling out a new medical plan. Our current one barely covers broken bones. A small, disbelieving smile tugged at her mouth. They asked me what our highest incident zones were. No one's ever asked me that. Why? To invest, she said. To fix them. I sat back slowly. Grace looked up at me. He's not cutting us, is he? No. Her shoulders dropped like she'd been carrying something heavy for years. Then I don't care what they call him on the news, she said. He can be the devil if he wants. Devils don't usually buy safety equipment. I smiled despite myself. The archive was quieter, dustier. Rows of labeled boxes. Old contracts. Facility schematics. Employment histories that stretched back generations. I pulled one at random, and nearly laughed. Modernization initiative, deferred. Inside were proposals dated 3 years ago. Equipment upgrades. Ventilation overhauls. Hazard pay adjustments. All denied. Too costly. Not essential. Revisit next fiscal cycle. Footsteps sounded behind me. Looking for ghosts? Lena asked. Looking for proof, I replied, holding up the folder. She grimaced. Yeah. We found a lot of those. You knew? Enough, she said. Enough to stop believing the fairy tale. She leaned against a shelf. Valdez's people have been in the facility since 5 a.m., measuring, photographing, writing checks. For what? Ventilation upgrades. New protective gear. Mental health services? She tilted her head. Your old board didn't believe in therapy. Niko does. I snorted. Of course he does. Of course he does, she echoed. Then, more softly, you look different. Tired? That too, she said. But also, like someone just rearranged the furniture in your head. I thought of the room without windows. Of faces on a screen. Of a man everyone called a predator pointing at people and calling them the point. I think, I said slowly, I might have been standing in the wrong doorway my entire life. Lena studied me. Careful. That's how people end up switching sides. I don't think there are sides, I said. Just stories. She smiled faintly. And facts. Exactly. When I left the archive, I didn't feel lighter. But I felt redirected. The fear was still here. The anger. The damage. But somewhere between Grace's coffee cup and the ghost proposals in a dusty box, something else had begun to take up space. Not trust. Not yet. But the unsettling awareness that the person I had been taught to resist might be the first one in this entire collapse who was actually trying to hold someone up. And that realization unsettled me more than any headline ever could. The office changed after midnight. Not in layout. In honesty. The lights dimmed automatically at 11. Conversations thinned into murmurs. Footsteps softened. The building stopped pretending it was efficient and started admitting it was tired. I should have gone home. Instead, I was standing in the hallway outside Niko's floor, staring at the reflection of myself in dark glass like it might offer a different explanation for the way my pulse had been misbehaving all evening. Every time I got close to him, something in my body recalibrated. Heat. Awareness. A low, unreasonable pull, like static under the skin. I hated it. I hated that after everything, after my name in the press, after my mother's calm betrayal, after the numbers and the faces, I still had to deal with my nervous system acting like it had opinions. Niko's office door was open. Light spilled across the floor. He was inside, jacket off, sleeves rolled, standing at the table with a tablet in one hand and a cup of something steaming in the other. He looked up immediately. "You're still here," he said. "So are you." Unfortunately, I stepped inside. The door whispered shut behind me. The air felt different this late, cooler, quieter, less corporate, more human. "What do you need?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. That was my first mistake. The second was moving closer. It was subtle. A few steps. But my body noticed like it had been waiting for permission. My shoulders tightened. My breath shortened. The space between us felt charged, like the moment before metal touches metal. "I think something's wrong with me," I said finally. Niko's brows drew together slightly. "Define wrong." "My head is perfectly capable of hating you," I said. "But my body keeps disagreeing." He didn't move. "That's inconvenient," he said. "Yes," I snapped. "It is." I turned away, restless, crossing to the balcony doors and pushing them open. Night air washed over me. The city glowed below, vast and indifferent. I leaned my hands on the railing and tried to breathe past the tension knotted in my chest. Footsteps approached. Not too close. Niko stopped a careful distance away. "Mark," he said, not softly, but deliberately. "Look at me." I didn't. "I'm not using pressure," he continued. "Not consciously, not chemically, not socially." "I know," I said. "That's what scares me." Silence stretched between us, filled only by distant traffic and the quiet hiss of the building systems. "Your body reacting," Niko said, "doesn't mean you owe me anything." I closed my eyes. "It doesn't mean you want anything," he added. "And it doesn't give me the right to take space you didn't offer." Slowly, I turned. He was standing with his hands loose at his sides, posture relaxed, but grounded. Not looming. Not retreating. Present. "Say that again," I said. "You don't owe me your reactions," Niko repeated. "They're not consent. They're chemistry. And chemistry is noisy." A short, surprised breath left me. "Most alphas don't talk like that," I said. "Most alphas," he replied, "are taught that what they trigger is theirs to manage." I disagree. Something in my chest shifted. Not heat. Something steadier. "I don't want to be another person who decides what happens to you," Niko continued. "You've had enough of those." The city wind tugged at my sleeves. My pulse was still uncooperative. My skin still aware of his proximity. My instincts still murmuring things my brain hadn't approved. But under all of it, something else held. Choice. "I'm angry," I admitted. "And confused. And whatever this is." I gestured uselessly between us. "Good," Niko said. "Anger means you're awake. And this?" He considered me. "This," he said, "means your body is reacting to someone who is not currently trying to control it." That can feel unfamiliar. I let out a weak, incredulous laugh. That's one way to put it. We stood there, not touching, not retreating. The moment stretched thin and quiet and almost dangerously comfortable. Then Niko stepped back. "Come on," he said. "I'll give you a ride. You look like someone who forgot what home feels like." In the car, the city slid past in blurred lines of gold and white. The radio murmured something soft and unimportant. We didn't talk, but for the first time since this began, my body wasn't shouting. It was listening. And that, somehow, unsettled me even more. The second archive was smaller than the first. Not the corporate one with its labeled shelves and controlled humidity, but the private one my mother kept in the Hale residence, a room she once called the memory wing, as if nostalgia could disguise inventory. I hadn't been here in months. The house still stood on its hill like it always had, white stone, narrow windows, manicured hedges cut into obedience. It looked like permanence. Inside it smelled like lemon oil and something faintly floral, clean, curated, untouched by the chaos it had quietly set in motion. The archive door opened with the soft complaint of old hinges. Boxes lined the walls, arranged by decade. Contracts, correspondence, legal drafts, the real history, without the frames. I pulled the first one I recognized. Strategic Outreach, Valdez Corp. My hands stilled. The dates on the tab were 4 years old. Inside were preliminary analyses, risk projections, minutes from private board discussions, and, folded neatly among them, a document with my own name typed into the header. Reputational asset integration. I sat down on the narrow bench beneath the shelves. The report outlined projected scenarios for a future acquisition, regulatory responses, media fallout, and then a section titled, Internal Stabilization, My Role, Public Continuity, Negotiation Presence, Trusted Hale Figure to Reassure Clients and Employees. A name to anchor the story. My name. I didn't read all of it. I didn't need to. The language was familiar. The same neutral phrasing I'd used in 100 deals. Mitigation, transition management, human capital optics. I closed the folder slowly. The house was very quiet. I heard my mother's footsteps before I saw her. "Mark?" she called. "I thought you might come." She stood in the doorway in a soft gray dress, hair perfectly arranged, expression gentle. She always looked like someone stepping into a photograph meant to last. "I found it," I said. Her gaze dropped to the folder in my hands. "Then you know," she replied. I stood. "You planned this before I ever met NIKO VALDEZ." "Yes, you planned it while you were sending me to other families," I said. "While you were letting me build a career around saving people." She inclined her head. "We needed time. To prepare," I said. "To clean the image. To make sure when the sale happened I would be believable." "You were believable," she corrected. "Because you believed it." The words hit with surgical precision. "So all of it," I said. "The speeches, the awards, the articles about ethical mergers, were useful," she said calmly. "They gave us leverage." My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. "You turned me into a prospectus." She stepped fully into the room now. "I turned you into protection." "For whom?" "For everyone," she said. "For this company, for the families that depend on it, for you, for me." My voice cracked despite my effort. "You sold me." She met my eyes. "We included you. In the deal. In the solution." The distinction was meaningless. "You didn't even ask," I said. Her lips pressed together briefly. "Not regret. Calculation. You've always been aligned with our interests," she said. "You understand sacrifice. You understand that families survive because someone absorbs the damage." I laughed. It sounded wrong, in the sterile room. "You mean someone volunteers to be the damage?" "You were never harmed," she said. "You've had every opportunity, every education, every platform, and no consent," I replied. Her expression softened, as if I were a difficult child. "Mark, families are corporations before they are anything else. The difference is that corporations admit it." I shook my head. "I am not an asset. You are our greatest one." The words slid into me like cold water. Something in my chest finally broke free of the pressure it had lived under my entire life. "No," I said. "I was your liability, and you hedged against me." She didn't deny it. "You wrote my role before I ever chose it," I continued. "You built a future where I was always already part of the contract. You're good at this," she said. "You're fulfilled by it." I was trained for it. Silence filled the archive, thick and absolute. Then I placed the folder back on the shelf. Carefully, like something that might still try to claim me if I dropped it. "I'm done," I said. She searched my face. "With what?" "With being your solution," I said. With being the person you use so you don't have to see what you're doing. You can't just walk away from your family. I met her eyes, and for the first time I didn't look for approval there. I can, I said. And I am. I turned and walked past her. She didn't follow. She didn't call my name. And that, more than anything she could have said, told me exactly how conditional my place had always been. When the door closed behind me, the house remained immaculate. And for the first time, it felt empty. The office after midnight didn't feel like a workplace. It felt like a shell. Entire floors dark. Emergency lights casting long diluted shadows. The hum of servers below everything else, steady and indifferent. Like a heartbeat that didn't care who you were. I didn't turn on the lights in the small conference room. I sat at the end of the table instead, elbows on the cool surface, hands clasped so tightly my fingers ached. I had walked out of my mother's house without a plan. Without a family. Without the role that had given my life shape since I was old enough to wear a tie. There was a strange clarity in it. And a vast, hollow quiet. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I felt like I'd already done my crying in advance, over decades, in polite controlled doses that had never earned the name. Now there was just zero. The door opened softly. I didn't look up. I knew who it would be by the way the air shifted, by the quiet confidence of the step, by the fact that my body registered his presence before my mind did. Niko didn't ask why I was here. He didn't ask what happened. He took the chair across from me and sat. No lights. No speeches. Just company. Minutes passed. The city moved outside, unseen. A siren wailed somewhere far below and then vanished again. I left, I said eventually. Niko nodded once. I know. How? You're not answering your mother's calls. I huffed a humorless breath. I didn't know it was that obvious. It's the kind of obvious that only appears when it finally happens. I stared at the dark surface of the table. I don't belong anywhere anymore. That's not true. It is, I said. I spent my entire life being a function. Now the system's gone. Niko leaned back slightly, not retreating, just making space. When a structure collapses, he said, everything feels like free fall. That doesn't mean there's nothing underneath. That sounds like something you say to employees before closing a department. Those speeches usually involve lies, he replied. This one doesn't. Silence returned. Then I said the thing I hadn't planned to say. They never wanted me, I said. They wanted what I could stabilize. Niko didn't interrupt. I thought being needed was the same as being loved, I continued. I thought if I was useful enough, no one would ever leave. My throat tightened. I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth until the feeling passed. Niko reached into his jacket and placed something on the table. A protein bar. I blinked. You haven't eaten since noon, he said. And your hands are shaking. I looked down. They were. It was such a small thing. Almost ridiculous. I picked up the bar. Turned it once in my fingers. Is this what emotional support looks like to you? I asked. It's what not letting people crash looks like, he replied. I unwrapped it and took a bite. The taste grounded me more than I expected. We sat there, chewing, breathing. After a moment, Niko spoke again. You don't have to decide who you are tonight, he said. You don't have to replace what you lost. What do I do then? For now, he said. Nothing. I frowned faintly. You sit, he continued. You exist. You let 0 be 0 instead of a verdict. I exhaled slowly. He stayed. Not because he had to. Not because a contract required it. Just because I was there. And in the hollow left behind by everything I had been, that simple, unremarkable fact began to build something that felt dangerously close to ground. Niko's office looked different in the morning. Sunlight changed everything. The dark panels softened. The plants caught gold along their edges. The city outside didn't loom, it stretched. I stood near the window, hands in my pockets, watching traffic thread itself into order I didn't yet trust. The night had left a residue in me. Not sadness. Space. Niko closed the door behind us and crossed the room, a slim folder in his hand. Before today starts trying to own us, he said, there's something I want to settle. He placed the folder on the table between us. I didn't open it. Is this the part where I sign something and accidentally agree to become a subsidiary? I asked. A corner of his mouth moved. No. He slid the folder closer. Open it. Inside were 3 pages. No dense blocks of text. No aggressive formatting. Just a simple header. Separation agreement. My pulse kicked. "You're firing me," I said. "I'm giving you the option to walk," Niko replied. I flipped the first page. Voluntary termination. No penalties. No non-competes. No public obligation. No silence clauses. No narrative control. It was clean. Too clean. "If I leave," I said slowly, "I don't represent you. No. I don't protect the transition. No. I don't owe you anything. No." I looked up. "Why?" Niko didn't answer right away. He moved past me to the terrace doors and pushed them open. Morning air slid in, bright and sharp. He stepped outside. After a moment, I followed. The terrace overlooked the city's east side. Rooftops. River glints. Construction cranes, suspended like punctuation. Niko rested his hands on the railing. "When we met," he said, "you were already being used." I leaned beside him, close enough to feel warmth without touching. "I won't build anything on that," he continued. "Not a company, not a partnership, not whatever this is becoming." "This," I echoed. He glanced at me then. Not guarded, not unreadable. Direct. "I don't want what was sold," Niko said. "I want what stays." The words settled into me slowly. "You're assuming I'd stay," I said. "I'm hoping you would," he replied. "But I'm making sure you don't have to." Wind tugged at my sleeves. Somewhere below, a truck horn flared and faded. "If I go," I said, "what happens to the company?" "It stabilizes," he said, "with or without you. I bought it because it needed intervention. Not because it needed you. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you free." I looked back at the folder inside. All my life, choices had arrived preloaded. With consequences outlined in advance, with emotional debts, with invisible clauses that always circled back to family. This one didn't. "What if I stay?" I asked. Niko didn't hesitate. "Then, you stay," he said. "As Mark, not as a bridge, not as a shield, not as a Hale. And if I change my mind later? Then you leave," he said. Without needing a reason that sounds noble. Something inside my chest shifted. Not heat. Not pressure. Relief. I picked up the folder, closed it, and set it aside. "Don't get optimistic," I said. "I'm not agreeing to anything." Niko's almost smile returned. "Good. Optimism makes people sloppy." I exhaled, a quiet, unguarded sound. "I don't know who I am yet," I said. "That makes two of us," he replied. We stood there a moment longer, city bright and indifferent below us. Then I said the only thing that felt true. "I'm not ready to leave." Niko's gaze didn't sharpen. It didn't claim. It simply held. Then, he said, "Welcome. Not to a company. Not to a contract. To a space where staying was something I did, not something that had been arranged." And for the first time in my life, that distinction felt like everything. The boardroom at Valdez Corporation didn't have portraits. No founders on the walls, no inherited gazes tracking the table. Just glass, light, and a long surface designed for decisions that were meant to be revised. I stood at one end of it with a stack of documents in front of me that no longer bore the Hale crest. Across the table sat Niko, Thomas, Lena, and representatives from 3 departments that had never before been invited into strategic conversations. Facilities. HR. Operations. People. "This clause," I said, tapping the first page, "guarantees employee retention minimums during restructuring. Not best effort. Not subject to review. Minimums." Thomas nodded. "We can codify that." "And this," I continued, turning a page, "creates an independent compliance channel. External audits. Anonymous reporting. No internal filtration." Lena lifted a brow. "Your mother is going to love that." "I'm not writing for her," I replied. That was new. We spent the next 2 hours dismantling language. Where contracts used to obscure, we clarified. Where they used to protect optics, we protected people. When it was done, the documents on the table looked lighter. Not simpler. Honest. I signed last. Not with the name I'd spent my career building into a brand. Just my name. Mark. The press conference was held at noon. Different room. Different lights. Same sensation of being watched by 1,000 invisible eyes. But when I stepped to the podium this time, I didn't feel like I was borrowing authority from a family I no longer recognized. The questions came fast. "Mr. Hale, are you still representing Hale Group?" "No," I said. A ripple went through the room. Are you employed by Valdez Corporation? Yes. Isn't that a conflict of interest? It would be, I replied, if I still had one. A murmur followed. My legal relationship with Heir Group is ended, I continued. I've terminated all advisory roles and severed corporate ties effective immediately. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. And your family? Someone called. What does this mean for them? It took less effort than I expected to answer. It means, I said, that I'm no longer their representative. I didn't add son. I didn't add bridge. I didn't add anything that could be used. The questions shifted. Are the rumors of mass layoffs false? Yes. Will Valdez dismantle the company? No. I gestured slightly, and the screen behind me lit. New charts, new language, investments, safety upgrades, retention frameworks, oversight. This transition, I said, is not about preserving a name. It's about preserving the people who built everything that name was printed on. I felt NIKO's presence at my side. Not looming. Aligned. When it ended, when the lights cut and the voices blurred into noise, I didn't go back to the PR floor. I went to a small legal office 3 floors below. My office. It didn't have history. It had a desk, a window, and a nameplate still wrapped in plastic. I peeled it off and set it where it belonged. Mark. No Heir Group. No inherited authority. Just a man who had decided to be present in the contracts he wrote. I sat, opened a fresh document, and began outlining a framework that had never existed in any of my previous lives. Not how to stabilize families. Not how to protect optics. But how to build something that could survive without feeding on the people inside it. For the first time, my hands didn't feel like tools. They felt like mine. And somewhere between the blank page and the city beyond the glass, I realized I wasn't losing a legacy. I was finally allowed to write one. Morning didn't arrive in crises anymore. It arrived in light. Soft gold slipping through the blinds, the distant murmur of traffic that sounded less like urgency and more like movement. The smell of coffee doing exactly what coffee was meant to do. I stood barefoot in the kitchen of an apartment that still didn't feel entirely like mine, waiting for the kettle to decide it had suffered enough. Behind me, NIKO leaned in the doorway, sleeves rolled, hair still unfairly unbothered by sleep. You're using the wrong mug, he said. I glanced down. This one says world's okayest attorney. That feels accurate. That one, he replied, pointing to the shelf, says control is an illusion. I'm not emotionally prepared for ironic ceramics before caffeine. He crossed the room anyway and swapped them, like this was a normal thing people did instead of arguing over hostile takeovers. The kettle clicked off. We took our coffee to the balcony. The city was awake but not screaming. Rooftops held the early light. Somewhere someone was practicing a trumpet badly and without shame. I got the report from Grace, NIKO said, sipping. Facility's incident rate is already down 12%. Don't tell her that, I said. She'll start believing in miracles. She already does, he replied. She believes in chairs that don't collapse. I smiled. The company had settled into something that resembled a living system. Departments spoke to each other. Oversight was no longer an insult. The words long-term had stopped meaning after the next quarterly report. People still complained. But they complained about normal things. Printers. Meetings. Bad coffee. I leaned on the railing, letting the warmth sink into my skin. You know, I said, 6 months ago, I would have defined stability as no one is angry. And now? And now, I said. I think it means people are allowed to be. NIKO studied me over the rim of his mug. That's a dangerous philosophy. I know. I'm very brave. He snorted quietly. There was ease between us now. Not the absence of tension. The absence of fear. We argued. We disagreed. We shut down and circled back, and occasionally stole each other's food without permission. But no one was negotiating their right to exist. My phone buzzed on the small balcony table. Lena. Media's bored. That's a good sign. Also, someone in marketing wants to call the new retention framework the Heir model. I said no. You're welcome. I typed back. Please continue protecting the world from that. NIKO glanced at the screen. You're becoming beloved. Don't ruin it, I said. I have a brand to not build. We stood there, city breathing below us, coffee cooling between our hands. For a long time, love had looked like function to me. Like being necessary. Like being difficult to replace. This didn't feel like that. It felt optional and chosen. Niko shifted closer, his arm brushing mine in a way that asked nothing and said everything. Mark, he said. I'm glad you stayed. I didn't make a joke. I didn't deflect. I turned toward him instead, sunlight catching in the dark of his eyes, and answered the only way that mattered. I didn't stay, I said. I arrived. Below us, the city moved. Above us, the sky did nothing dramatic at all. And for the first time in my life, that was exactly what made it beautiful.